So today I'm delighted to have Morag Garden, CEO of English Whisky Guild, as our guest. Morag, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you. This is very exciting. All new to me.
So Morag, before you took on this role as a CEO with English Whisky Guild, you were with Scotch Whisky Association for more than a decade, leading voice in championing sustainability, environmental innovation, and now with English Whisky Guild, flag bearer, and obviously promoting it locally as well as across the world. What inspired you to your transition to English whisky?
I mean, if I can go a little bit further back and just sort of, my career history is that I did an environmental degree at Edinburgh. So, sustainability's been there in my career since day one. And then I was in Scottish Water. So I was first working in that trade effluence of the policemen of the sewers, and then moved into environmental policy in Scottish Water. So that was kind of, already had that sort of policy knowledge. I was focusing on sustainable urban drainage, diffuse pollution, things like that. I then saw the role in the Scotch Whisky Association. So I jumped from water to whiskey. Which is definitely the way to go. You make a lot more friends that way than whiskey to water. And so the trade association, the SWA, wanted that kind of policy lead for sustainability or environment when I moved over. And I had all that skill set and then had to learn about whiskey. But I'm assuming they could have done the same thing where they could have got somebody who knew all about whiskey and then kind of, trained them up on environmental policy, but they went that way. So I just say I was there for 10 years. I led the sustainability strategy over 3 iterations for the Scotch whisky sector. And they were very much in that kind of beyond compliance. I would say that the Scotch whisky sector was really leading in sustainability within businesses and understanding that it was critical. It was a boardroom discussion. I then sort of around 2020 or 2019, you could see sustainability moving into the board. It was like a core agenda item on the board. It was like all businesses were seeing this as really important. And it was like, okay, if I don't jump now, I'm going to miss the boat because I'm a bit of a generalist. I don't deep dive into modeling or other things. And within the SWA, I was also doing research and science, food safety. So I definitely was leaning towards sustainability, but it wasn't my whole job. So I then jumped in 2020 to a consultancy called Carbon Intelligence. Okay. So that was a independent sustainability consultancy based in London, actually. So I moved down there for 18 months and I was the associate director on the food and drink and just leading the programs around carbon because they worked out that if you wanted businesses to think about sustainability, you essentially talked to them about carbon and carbon footprinting and you kind of got them yourself in there and then you kind of, widen out everything after that. So as I was there, the job came up, which was the CEO of English Whisky Guild. And it was sustainability, whiskey and lobbying, my kind of perfect trio.
Perfect.
So yeah, exactly. So I was like, I've got to go for it. So I went for the perfect role and, here I am today.
Great. And I think a lot of focus on environmental and sustainability side of things has always been there. And UK as a nation has been obviously leading and championing. But when it comes to kind of what happened post-COVID and the energy prices went up, do you think the combination of obviously the focus on environmental sustainability as well as increasing energy prices kind of almost like was the final push like producers, clients and needed to say, like, we really need to go after this?
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I've not really thought about it before. I mean, I did kind of think about when I was in the Scotch Whisky Association, a lot of the companies, as I say, had sustainability at their board level and they knew it was just the right thing to do. So a lot of the Scotch whisky companies moved into renewable energy and utilising their byproducts as a source. And that was one of the things when the energy crisis happened. It's like, oh, suddenly they've been disconnected from, because they're in control of their own energy. And even though the payback when they did it was maybe 8 to 12 years, which is beyond that return of investment. Suddenly, that return of investment definitely shortened.
Yeah,
so
that's a good point,
therefore, making it a go-to for any sensible business decision. So yeah, it probably was another push, but also challenging for those companies that
Absolutely.
that couldn't
I can
afford
imagine.
to invest in their own energy centers.
Yeah, and I think a lot of funds have come, support from the government to obviously allow companies to help with the transition to more greener and environmental friendly solutions, and
Yeah.
definitely seeing that a lot more in
Yeah.
the last 5-6 years.
Yeah. And one of my members, Cooper King, they've worked with the local authority, I believe, to get some. They've invested in some solar. Because they're 100% renewable energy electric. They've got an electrical still, so they've been working on
It can
solar
almost
power.
become a part of the story of the
Yeah,
brand.
it's absolutely their story.
And I think English Whisky is, and we'll come to English
Yeah,
Whisky
yeah.
in a second. But yeah, thanks for obviously giving your background and sharing your background.
Yeah.
If we go to English Whisky Guild, could you please elaborate what is English Whisky Guild and what is the main purpose?
Yeah, so I the English Whisky Guild. If I could do a bit of a history,
Sure.
So English whisky is established. It was historically a category. So back in the the late 18th century, there's around 6-7 English whisky distilleries. The last one closed around 1897. Well, moved into being a gin distillery, and then got burnt down in around 1903. I don't know if that's from some angry English whisky consumers or not. So for 100 years, there was no English whisky in England. And then again, Hicks and Healy were the first company. They worked with a local brewery called St Austell Brewery and used a compliant distillery wort and created the first English whisky. And then the first all-in-one site distillery was the English Whisky Company. And so they're the oldest, and they're one of our members. And so probably around 2014, I think the distilleries that were producing whiskey in England looked around and thought, wow, there's enough of us here. We're a collective. Yeah. And if we want to make a category, English whisky, then, coming together as a trade association is the kind of, the traditional standard way of doing it. Because at the moment, we sit under New World whisky. You've got the traditional whisky, which is Scottish, Irish, American, Japanese, and then you've got the New World whisky, which is the rest of the world, and that's where English whisky sits. So we're there. So they wanted to make that category. So they came together. So there's 15 founding English whisky distilleries who did all the hard work. They created the Articles of Association. They worked out the membership, and they launched the guild in May 22.
Very good.
So the first thing they did was they wanted two things. They wanted a full-time employee at a high level, and they wanted to develop a geographical indication to set that standard of what English whisky is. So they went bold, went high, and decided to go for a CEO. And I came in 23. And it's been a roller coaster since. And I've got several areas that I think, since taking on the role that I need to be focusing on. One of them is obviously supporting my members. That's a real traditional activity for an association. I help my businesses grow, I provide resources, share best practice, facilitate that collaboration, helping them with their business, operating businesses by lobbying for regulations and government, markets insights, giving them training and developing. But the other thing that I do, which is probably a bit new, is it because it's a new organisation, new trade association. So I'm also creating a new organisation and setting up the governance structure, defining the missions and vision, a robust membership framework. So it's really, really exciting that I've got this actual another area that maybe other trade associations don't have to do. And that's as well as that kind of raising the profile of English whisky and making that collaborative network. So those are all the kind of areas that I've been working on since starting.
So Guild is a startup, obviously, having started and you have to kind of think about all the areas from marketing, business development, operations, and business support functions. At the moment, you're wearing multiple hats as you do when something is at start. And I think that must resonate with a lot of your members who are obviously, they must be going from a startup to a scale-up phase, and must be facing similar challenges in terms of setting their operations or becoming more efficient. And I think every organization goes through that. and I think there's a kind of knowledge exchange almost, between the guild and these members who are now.
Yeah.
And am I right to say there are more than half the English distilleries are now kind of part of the English Whisky Guild? That's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, no, it's true. So yeah, we've probably got, I'd say the the English Whisky Guild is probably the voice of the industry in terms of the majority of English whisky on the market by volume and value. So we've got the majority there, but in terms of numbers, we're 26. And the last time Cooper King do an annual map of English whisky distilleries, they release it on St. George's Day. The last map had around 49, 50, but I've also read in other kind of independent articles, there's now looking like 60 distilleries who are creating English whiskey. So. And
that just shows the growth from early 2000s to having one whiskey on the map to now having, more than 50 distilleries. It's a tremendous, obviously, growth and a bit of a challenge to the Scottish whiskey industry.
Yeah. I think, I kind of say we talk about whiskey family. So, we're very much... kind of in the UK, once we have our geographical indication or GI, then all 4 nations in the UK are going to have their own GI for whiskey, which, is really exciting. And
Ireland is going through a similar journey as well, because they have had a lot of changes over the years. And you've seen that while English whiskey can obviously have a blank sheet and can lay the foundation for the future members, for the future distillery startups to follow the guidelines. And I think that's what you want. But I think having a industry as big as Scottish whisky industry at your doorstep also allows you to get a lot of learnings and knowledge sharing. Yeah,
and there's a lot of I'd say a lot of the employees or within the whiskey companies in England. There's quite a few of them that I know that have come. Have come from the Scotch whisky world. Obviously, my network and history is Scotch whisky, and they're amazing, and I certainly lean on them. And there's lots of independent consultants that had spent their 30 years in the Scotch whisky industry and are now kind of setting themselves up. And I know, many of those guys are working and supporting the English whisky distilleries to help them sort of grow and make the the highest quality product possible.
And if you have to kind of think about, obviously you're speaking to a lot of these members who you now have as part of the English Whisky Guild. If you have to kind of summarize, major top challenges you hear, no matter who you're speaking to, and you just talked about people, who used to be obviously working in the ex-employees of, Scottish whisky industry and then moved to English whisky. Do you think skill set is one of the challenges that you find? Or would that be in top 3, or there are other bigger challenges?
Oh, I don't know.
I'll leave it up to you.
I don't know what, I've not really, as the guild is kind of new and modern, and we're really kind of focusing on raising the profile of the guild, raising the profile of English whisky, supporting them in that kind of business environment, optimizing it. One of the things I do is do monthly webinars aim to do monthly webinars with my members. Okay. And that is definitely helping them with that kind of skills and knowledge. But yeah, I think in Scotland there's an formal apprenticeship, spirit operators, and it'd be great to see something like that in England. But you've also got IBD, CIBD. Yeah. And again, I think a lot of my members, that's a great source to help upskill and that continuous learning while they're working at the same time.
Yeah, I think things like the webinars, which you're saying that you're thinking of organizing in the coming months, that will definitely provide them with that sort of knowledge sharing and learning from one another and seeing what else is happening. Because in today's kind of digital age, world is such a kind of small space that the information travels fast. And you can get a lot of information on the internet. And if you're trying to, so you're not bound to just kind of bound by traditional ways of going to conferences and you have so much on LinkedIn, internet, that the information travels fast.
And I think that's one of the things about the English Whisky Guild and have got founders and we're kind of startup companies. We are small but nimble and agile.
Yeah.
So we really kind of lean into that, and it's very short decision-making trees.
Good.
So when opportunities come along,
you can really
we can really go for it. Exactly.
Yeah. No, that's good. And what role do you think the distillery visits and experiences? There's a lot of focus on visitor experience nowadays. The distillery is not just about producing whiskey. It's also about giving, obviously brand and telling people about your story. Do you think that plays a huge role?
Absolutely critical. I mean, we, as modern distilleries, I think the oldest is around 18 years. Everybody's under 20 years. So, we don't have that 200-year history and marketing teams that have been working on the brands for decades. So tourism plays that absolute pivotal role. Yeah. And it's really one of the priorities for the English Whisky Guild. So I kind of work closely with Visit England, and we're exploring lots of collaborative activities there, both to promote the sector as well as raise the profile of the individual distilleries as tourist destinations. So one of my future plans is to develop regional whiskey trails and really highlight those unique, or allow that to highlight those unique offerings for the distillery, and for them to become distillery ambassadors. So our distilleries are really thinking about this already, and there's immersive experiences, there's tours, tastings, we've got shops, cafes, bars. One of our distilleries, Ardgeffren Distillery, has its own Anglo-Saxon museum, which is just a really kind of a great experience and really kind of original way to bring in tourism that maybe not necessarily think about whiskey, but they're coming for the museum element and then experiencing the whiskey. Other distilleries have kind of leaning into that industrial heritage, so they're they've repurposed some Victorian buildings and kind of brought them back to life, and so leaning on that heritage as well. So it really is a kind of destination, and we want to amplify the sense of place and be an event space for our communities, and definitely critical in terms of brand development.
Yeah, I think that's quite interesting, because even though you might not be 200 years old as a brand, but if you obviously decide to house yourself or house your production and visitor experience in one of the historical sites, then that becomes a part of the brand. And I think you can kind of approach it that way.
Loads of different ways. Like one of my members was a farmer, then became a brewer, and is now a distiller. So that's Spirit of Yorkshire. So I mean, like their story that they can tell at their brand house, at their distillery, is another. Storytelling's just obviously like one of the critical things, and just that provenance, sense of place, regional locality, as well as the high quality spirit. Those are all the things that the consumer wants to experience. Yeah.
So how does English whiskey differentiate itself on a global scale, on a global market? Because it's quite a competitive market.
Yeah, I mean, so as I say, I think English whiskey straddles both that New World whiskey as well as that UK manufacturing craftsmanship, which is a pretty good space to be.
To differentiate
yourself. Yeah. And so I think we've kind of got 4 areas which we focus on. So we think about quality and flavour first. That's one of our core agendas. So, the embedding that commitment on quality and flavour within the business plans. Limited cask release, innovative grains, long fermentations, experimental yeast, and everything there. So the emphasis being on exceptional taste experiences for the consumer. We also really lean in on the innovation agenda, which, links into what I've said above. That is the lifeblood of English whiskey, both in techniques, ingredients, aging, we all of those things to deliver that
variety of grains.
Creating that unique expression. The geographical indication and that protection, which I've mentioned, that was one of the principal reasons for setting up the guild. And so collectively, the members have looked at all the elements of different GIs, seen what's best practice, seen what fits in with what the English whiskey wants to create, and as well as reflecting, the market and what consumers want. And that collegiate draft has gone into, working alongside DEFRA, who are ultimately the government owners of a GI. And, watch this space. Hopefully we'll beget our geographical indication, soon. It sits with DEFRA, so that's ultimately them. So those are the kind of main kind of areas. And the final one I'd say is premium brands. So all our members, their brands are sat within premium and above. So that's the kind of 4 areas that, as the English Whisky Guild and members, we're really leaning into to kind of set ourselves out across all the other different whisky regions. And
good. And we talked about obviously sustainability when we started the podcast, and then that's been a core part of what you have led ever since you're part of Scotch Whisky Association, and even before, as you were saying. So how is English Whisky Guild addressing sustainability?
So again, just taking a step back slightly and then answering that question. So when I first started in the English Whisky Guild, we kind of set out our 6 pillars, and it's really just like where I need to focus. And if all my activities, if it fits one of these pillars, that it just helps me focus on where I need to be working. They're very broad. They're technical, which our GI sits in. They're communication, which is this, and lobbying government, trade, that international trade, supporting them there, but sustainability, tourism and governance. So sustainability is one of those core areas. So, the English Whisky Guild does support our members, and, we've got to think our products are based on nature and agriculture. So, environment is obviously critical. And the ESG principles really sit across all our members' operational and business plans. And sustainability is a journey rather than a destination. So all my members probably have their own route map and lean into their own specialities of where they want to focus on. And I see the Guild as being a platform, a stage to raise the profile of all these kind of activities and successes, celebrating that success, and also being a signpost and roadmap to what new technologies, new processes are out there. Because, as I say, it's a journey. So you're always going to be doing more. There's always something you can do in terms of sustainability. And I can give you some examples of some of the kind of things that my members are doing. Obviously, I'm going to end up missing out some of my members, but a kind of example. So I mentioned them previously. Cooper King Distillery. So they are the first English whiskey to distill using net zero energy, and it's been powered by 100% renewable energy. You've got Ellis Farm, also in North Yorkshire, and they have they became B Corp certified in 2023. So they're really focusing on carbon reduction projects and reforestation schemes. I've got a number of my members are regenerative farming, and I think also there's ones that are farmers themselves, so they absolutely control all their barley, all their cereals, and they're really leaning into that regenerative farming. So Spirit of Yorkshire, Witchmark Distillery is there. And then you've got Fieldin, which is looking at regenerative farming and growing heritage rye grain. So there's a kind of another area. You've also got Cotswolds Distillery, who have invested in a biodiverse wetlands ecological treatment. So they're looking at their waste streams and effluent and making sure that, it's going in and treated and creating its own kind of nature and wetland system on site. So there's just a kind of quick flavour of different things that my members are up to in terms of sustainability.
Oh, that's great. And I think that just goes on to show that it's not just decarbonizing or applying sustainability in the production of whiskey, but also the whole supply chain, across the whole supply chain, from kind of grain to glass. They have, taken these innovative approaches to address.
There was a conference just last year, and Cooper King were presenting at it, and they did this excellent presentation where it was like they kind of, sustainability's been in their ethos right from day one. They've built it around that, and so they just went really practically through all the different areas of their touch points within their business to create whiskey, and what they've thought about and the decisions they've made, from packaging, from the energy, from they support reforestation. Like I think they have team days that go out, and everything in between. And it was a great little checklist for other distilleries to think about.
It's a good kind of almost like a blueprint for companies who are now either thinking of starting distillery or expanding, and perhaps they see as an opportunity to apply some of these measures, which obviously reduces the energy required in the first place as well. That also then allows you to, you were talking about the return on investment earlier, and it enables the adoption of greener solutions.
And that's probably what I should have said is, it's so obvious. I sometimes forget it, is that because we're modern distilleries, we have designed these distilleries in the last 20 years. So energy efficiency is built into the bricks. All the kind of modern technology and processes that can help with that energy efficiency, have been thought about and where possible invested in. So we've got that advantage than perhaps distilleries which are a couple of centuries old in historical buildings. There's other challenges for those guys there, while we have been able to design it into that modern element.
Right. I mean, it's good to understand what English Whisky Guild has accomplished in the last 3 years, and now what your your immediate kind of opportunities are that you see, and how you can bring the whole community together to buy into these ethos you talked about. If you have to kind of share your aspirations, almost like a long-term plan, where do you see it in 10 years' time?
So if I can look, I'm looking kind of 3-5 years ahead. So, the core is being positive and in promoting the English whisky category as well as the guild. So ultimately, I would like to see the guild become that kind of, alongside the UK Spirits Trade Association, one of the go-to critical UK trade associations, and also sit within that peer network of the Global Spirits Network as well. So, so that establishing the English Whisky Guild as a robust association. I see myself as Team English Whisky. So I really want to foster that strong sense of community, that culture within the guild. So my members and English whisky distilleries feel supported, valued, inspired, and I'm, actively helping them promote their success and growth. Obviously, global recognition, making sure that English whisky is recognised to be a premium and distinctive category in the global market, and it's celebrated for that quality, innovation, and diversity of spirit. And then, continue to champion sustainability, tourism, and community, and shaping, that English whisky is enriching both the cultural and economic fabric of all the English whisky regions, because every region in England has at least one English whisky distillery in it, and some of them, especially Yorkshire, has quite a few.
Well, I think you're a true flag bearer, and looks like they couldn't have asked for a better person to lead the effort. And I'm really excited, because I think I can't wait for the day that I can go on English Whisky Guild website and I'll see all the trails of the which you can take, and I'm looking forward to that. In terms of we talked about ESG and obviously sustainability, environmental governance, like a key part of it. There's another key pillar which sits along ESG, that is diversity and inclusion.
Oh, yeah.
And you being one of the sort of women leaders in the whiskey industry, how do you see yourself obviously supporting the industry?
So I think, as I said previously, English whisky sector is modern. The oldest one's less than 20 years old. And a lot of the founders they're co-founders. So I've got a really large number of female leaders already in my membership. And so obviously you'll have read it cover to cover, but we published our first annual review of the English Whisky Guild in May last year. And I had a whole section around founders, and we had three female founders and three male founders, just, giving their kind of story and history. So it feels like, a really as I say, it's a modern sector. And I think for me personally, if I'm honest, my title helps. I'm the CEO of the English Whisky Guild. So there's no one above me.
You set the precedent.
There's no one above me to talk about English whiskey. So if you want to speak about somebody about English whiskey, you've got to come to me. So I've not experienced really any challenges. And as we've talked about, that community and network being bowled over with the support and help across the whiskey community. And I just thought, because of this question, I also wanted to give a shout out for Our Whiskey Foundation, which does a fantastic job at lifting women across the global whiskey industry. So it's a non-profit organisation which recognises, supports and empowers women in whiskey all around the world. And it really advocates for that inclusivity and diversity. And many of the women in the English whiskey sector have been both mentors and mentees, and the experience from that has been really amazing and empowering. And that's just like a great initiative that I hope grows and grows.
Yeah, and before we finish, I would love to ask you that if you have any advice for aspiring, new distillers who want to set up their distilleries in England, and obviously and produce English whiskey. Where do you see kind of English Whisky Guild supporting? Yeah,
so I mean, my advice would be join the guild. Because like no one person knows everything, and your network, and which we've talked about, is absolutely key. So on the positive side, there's so much knowledge out there. So if you have the time, the money, and the resources, you'll be able to lean into all areas. But that isn't true in life, is it? So especially when you're starting a whiskey business, there's a lot of investment there. So, you kind of need to focus on the areas that are priority to you, and you build it up, and it's a journey. And so, so that'd be my advice is, in terms of that sustainability, what resonates with you, start there, tick it, move on. But also, just that network is key. So you're probably not the first person to think about it or ask that question. Communities and networks like the Guild and CIBD and, anything else is super helpful. And so you can, make sure that you are able to, or as a collective, we can all kind of get on that sustainable journey and get there further, faster, quicker, more efficiently if we do it together rather than kind of individually. So I think be part of some community, and if it's English whiskey you're going to create, then join the Guild.
Yeah, and do you foresee Guild kind of in the near future doing any joint events with Scotch Whisky Association or other similar
which we've done already actually?
Okay.
So I've ran a few webinars, and when the webinar, if it's of relevance, because I've still obviously got connections both. So I've sent it to the SWA, and some members have joined, and MDAS, the Malt Distillers Association Scotland, and other trade associations. So we actually were kindly invited to their 150th anniversary dinner, which was last November. So myself and a group of English whiskey producers went up, and we had a great time, and it's a great networking. If you think about the decades of, or century maybe, of knowledge and information and skills within the whiskey production that sits in the MDAS. So that was an amazing. So I definitely see, this whiskey community. And one of the other areas that we've done a bit differently from the other UK trade associations is we've created an associate membership. And it's kind of like a core limited number of key suppliers that can sit within the English Whisky Guild, and we just, as that community, we learn from each other. They've got skills and knowledge that are really useful for our members, and hopefully our members, and letting them understand the English whisky sector and our distilleries, etc., is really useful for them. And we just work together as a really close community. So that's also been a real success, and another one of the building blocks for the Guild.
That's great, Morag, and thank you so much for being with us today. And as I said, it was an absolute pleasure to have you.
No, thank you, and I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you.